Right, so we are joined by Dwight Strayer. Dwight, you were highly recommended by Sean Price, who was a previous guest on The Truth About Business. So I've been really looking forward to talk to you about your own experiences in business. I know you've had a really interesting and successful career so far. So first of all, thank you for taking out some time across the pond to share your own business truths with us on The Truth About Business today.
Very good. Thanks for having me.
So we know that as of now, you are the Chief Operations Officer of Service Xpress, which is a huge business in the US. You've got a team of over 400 people. You've been in business for over 26 years. But we want to know about how it all started. So can you take us back to those early years and talk to us about how you got your first job and what were you doing?
Yeah, so this was early mid 80s, and PCs, computers were just coming of age, and I was taking every class I could in school and college, COBOL and Fortran, and just trying to figure out how computers worked. I just loved them. And so I had 3 years of college and still really didn't know what I wanted to do, but I had this love for computers. And I didn't think I wanted to be a computer engineer, sit at a desk designing circuits all day. So I ended up, after 3 years of college, I went to a 2-year tech school, ITT, which doesn't even exist anymore. So after 5 years of schooling, I got a 2-year degree. So not a very auspicious start. But right out of back then it's kind of funny. Back then you had to type up your resume on a typewriter, and then take it to a printer, of all things, and have your resume printed. And I got a call. I had just graduated. I got a call from a guy that said, "Hey, the school sent your resume over, and we'd like to talk to you." So I went to go meet with him, and I remember being really upset because I still didn't have my resumes from the printers yet, and he had this really cheap, cheesy copy that the school sent him. And so that was money that I spent that I never even used. Interviewed him on a Thursday or Friday. I talked to his partner on a Monday, and they hired me. So the name of the company was Great Lakes Computer, and they had 4 employees, and so I was employee number 5. And what they did was they bought and resold used computer hardware. So DEC, Digital Equipment Corporation, they sold that hardware, and so it was my job to stay in the warehouse and configure as things came in, tear them apart, test them, configure new computers, and ship out based on the configurations that our clients had purchased. As time went on, I realized that the value of the owner, Joe Kent, there was 2 owners, Joe Kent and Keith Harold, and I consider them both amazing mentors and heroes in my business life. I wanted to emulate them. They just exuded success, and as I got to know them, they would tell me stories about how they mortgaged the house and maxed out their credit cards. And one of the owners, Joe, he was a huge car guy. He passed away, unfortunately, but at his death, he had a collection of Porsche cars. And so looking back, he was driving a Reliant K car station wagon because it was the cheapest car he could find that would work for the business and would get him back and forth to work. And when I think back of what he sacrificed, that really inspires me even more. So I was employee number 5, and because of how he invested in me, it was my goal to get him out of things that I knew were of lower value for him. He'd come to the warehouse and help configure computers, and once I had it, I would tell him, "Hey, you need to leave, go back to the office, run the business. I got this." And I just always wanted to help people. And so that also served well when I would go out. They would sell a system, and then they would say, "Hey, can you install it? Can you perform this upgrade?" And I would do that as well. And I learned customer service from doing that. And as time went on, more and more customers were asking us for upgrades. They were asking us to install things and then fix things. And then ultimately, they started asking us to maintain them. They were paying a lot of money to DEC at the time for hardware maintenance. And so they were asking us, "Hey, instead of paying them, how about if I pay you?" And so we started signing these maintenance contracts. And we had a few. And then another person entered the company. By this time, like I say, I was employee number 5. By this time, there was maybe 40 or so people at the company, and it's rocking. It's doing well. And Mike McCullough joined Great Lakes Computer. This is now this fast forward. This is like the mid late 90s. He joined the company, and he said, "Hey, there's a really cool maintenance business we could really go after and actually sell it, not just wait for customers to ask us." And so he approached the owners, and they agreed. They threw some money in a bank account, and Mike took a salesperson and 2 engineers, and I was one of the engineers. And I remember that conversation. He pulled me into this, and I was kind of like, I was employee number 5, so I was like the big guy. I was the guy that knew everything technically. I knew how the warehouse ran. I could run any service call, and I was kind of the man. So he pulled me aside and said, "Hey, we're starting this new company. We're going to call it Service Xpress, and I want to take you with me." And I said, "Nah, I don't know. I think I'm just going to stay here because I like Great Lakes Computer." And he said, "Too bad, you're going with me." And I said, "Okay." And that was I think back to that moment. If I had put my foot down and said, "No, Mike, I'm staying here," I'm not sure where I would be today. And Mike was another amazing mentor, the exact same age as me. I think our birthdays are less than 30 days apart. And he became another amazing mentor. And so we left Great Lakes, the mothership, and we started, again, I was employee number 4 or 5 again, and we started selling service contracts and really going after it. And we were growing tremendously, 100% growth in the very beginning. It slowed down, and then we got to a point where we said, "Hey, we need managed growth." So our goal was to grow 20% a year. We knew that if we grew less than 20% a year, we weren't growing fast enough to help us hit our goals and what we really wanted to accomplish. But if we grew faster than that, we realized that we would grow too fast, and we would stretch people, and we would start falling down. We start letting our customers down, start letting our employees down. So we kept it to that. And so that was kind of the nucleus and the beginning of Service Xpress, where I'm at now.
So going back to those earlier days then, when you had that passion for computers, can you remember the age when you first discovered computers, and what was it about them that made you fall in love with them? Was there anything in particular?
It's interesting. They had really, really rudimentary games that you could plug to your television set back then, like ping pong and things like that. In the early 80s, if you're that age, or you go back and look at an old movie, they had arcades, and you would have to get in a car and drive to an arcade to play a video game. And video games is kind of like, I think video games even today really get a lot of young kids engaged and involved in technology. And so that was part of it. But when they came out with the first computer, and the first computer I ever put my fingers on was a Radio Shack TRS-80. And our school bought a few of them. They built a computer lab, and they created a basic computer class. And I took the class, and I went well and above and beyond every single assignment. Whatever the teacher taught, I learned more, and it was just fun because you could program something and then show it to someone, and they were amazed. Their eyes would get big, and they'd be like, "Wow!" And it's when you're young and impressionable, and you have an impact on someone else, and you can see where you can make someone else happy or someone else excited about something. That just really tripped my trigger, and I thought that was pretty cool. So I think that's the nucleus of how I got involved and interested.
And you said from those earlier days that you obviously had a big interest in IT and computers and technology, but you weren't really sure where you wanted to take your life with regards to a career. Did you always see yourself from those younger years as being the successful head of a business, or an entrepreneur, or in the C-suite of a business such as Service Xpress? Was that something that you expected of yourself?
I don't think so. I always had really big dreams. My father is a dreamer, and he instilled in me the ability to dream and think big, and but not to a point where you're just disappointed if you don't hit those goals, or you have to step on people. Everything my father always did helped people in some way, and I caught that as well, and that's where I get the most satisfaction. But I always told people, I would literally tell people I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. And I don't know, I was just driven. I just wanted things. I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to do. I wanted to have. it's interesting. I think most here in America, most young boys, they have pictures of Lamborghinis on their bedroom wall. And it's funny because, the parents look at that and say, well, why, you're never going to have a Lamborghini. But in my mind, let the boy dream. Let him think about that. And he may never have a Lamborghini, but you know what? He's probably going to have a nicer car because of it, because he's thinking about those things.
And that drive and ambition and that confidence to tell people that you were going to be a millionaire by the time you were 30, was that something that was fostered by the people that were around you in your younger years, or do you feel it's just born into you? Is it just part of your DNA? Were there any influences who were persuading you to go along those routes of thinking? Well, did it come from your parents or other family members or friends?
I think it's probably a mix. I was wired for it, I think, but also, if you go back to the early mid 80s, which younger listeners won't know this, it was the time of the yuppie, people working 60, 70, 80 hours a week, and BMWs and, 3-piece suits, and it was boom times. And, we'd come out of the 70s, out of the oil embargo, and just really a depressed time. And, looking back, it was probably excessive, but it was just, I grew up in a very impressionable time where I had memories of having a black and white television, not being able to even afford a microwave oven, to, people driving BMWs, and, you could have all this. And I don't think I got caught up in the materialistic side of it, but I did get caught up in I can do better. I can have more. I want more for my life, and someday my family's life.
Okay. And going again, fast forwarding a bit now to the launch of Service Xpress, you've stayed with the business. You're obviously now the chief operations officer of the business since 1988, which is a long time, especially nowadays, for anybody to stay with one particular company, which is a huge achievement in itself. But can you give us a bit of a summary of what happened between or during those years, and how you were able to progress through the ranks to the position that you're in now?
Yeah, it's the classic 32-year overnight success story. I told you a bit about the beginning. At this time, when we split off and we were growing in the 90s, I was a field engineer, and I had my clients, I had my territory, and I loved my clients. I loved walking into a situation where they were like, this is awful. I'm going to lose my job. Our system is down. And just having complete confidence that when I left, they would be shaking my hand and thanking me. And that happened 99 times out of 100. And I loved that feeling. I loved being the hero and coming in and kind of saving the day. And I kind of lived in my own world, so to speak. I was a field engineer, like I say, in my own territory. And Mike McCullough, who I mentioned, who was running the company, I also knew that I wanted to be around him as much as possible. So I would have 2, 3, or 5 service calls, who knows where. And, sometimes I would drive to Detroit, Chicago. I was all over the place, just whatever it took. And I would like race, try to get my calls all done so I can come back, and then act as calm as I could and casually walk by his office. And if he wasn't on the phone, I'd say, hey, you got a minute? And go in and just sit down and just ask him questions and listen to him. I just wanted to be around him because he was going someplace. And back to Joe Kent, he was going someplace. I wanted to be a part of it. And how I wanted to be a part of it was I wanted to help him. And we have, matter of fact, I'm looking out the window of my office right now, and we have a quote from Zig Ziglar on the wall where our executive leadership team works. And basically the quote is, you can have everything in life that you want if you just help enough other people help get what they want. And Joe believed that, Mike believed that, I believe that to my core. You don't get ahead by stepping on people. It might be a short-term or abusing people or taking advantage of people. It might be short-term success, but long-term, I know you're not going to be happy, and it's a house of cards that's going to fall down. And so I would just get around him as much as I could, and I loved being the number 2 guy. I didn't want to be, if someone said, hey, your president's leaving, we'd like you to be the president of the company, I would decline. I don't want to be the top guy. I love being the number 2, the guy that makes the number 1 guy look great. And I've always kind of been that way. I like being behind the scenes. I like I like taking care of the things that they don't want to deal with. But obviously that has to be a great leader, someone that I believe in wholeheartedly.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And one of my previous guests has said that it was Susan Hallen, MBE, who runs a big digital marketing agency over here in Nottinghamshire. And she said for a successful business, you have to have somebody who can visualize, who can dream the future, but then you have somebody who can execute. And if you have, you rarely get somebody who is good at both. You have to have the person with the dreams and the ambition and the visualization, but then you also have to have somebody that can go away and execute on it. And you strike me as the person who likes to, as you say, you're behind the scenes, making these dreams happen, pushing the company forwards, not necessarily being the focal point of the company, but making a huge difference inside. Is that something that you've developed over the years, or have you just always felt that you've been that way inclined?
I've always been that way. I believe I was always kind of that quiet guy that would just watch and observe. I was like, I think a lot of people are, but again, I think the way you're wired, you assume everybody else is wired that way too, but I'm drawn to successful people. I'm drawn to people that have something that I don't, that I want. I want to be around those people. And there's I forget who said it, but your income is going to be the average of the 5 people that you hang around with the most. And I didn't live my life and try to be around people that made a lot of money. I wanted to be around people that I wanted to be around. I wanted to be around people that just made life fun. They were moving, they were doing things, and they were accomplishing things. And I've kind of always been that way. I think, in high school, my best friend was the senior class president, and I would tell him a joke, and then he would say it louder, and he'd get all the laughs. But I got as much satisfaction out of that than he did, and I've always really liked kind of being behind the scenes and being an instrumental part though of the success of whatever I was involved in.
Yeah, I think it's Jim Rohn. Your network is your 5 people you spend the most time with, and that's a really interesting point as well, because I think from quite early on you grasped onto the fact that the more time you can spend with these successful people who you want to be around with, the more chance there is of their experiences and way of thinking rubbing onto you and enhancing your own success. So for people that are in business now, they're not necessarily the business owners, but they have aspirations of becoming an entrepreneur and starting their own business, and have access to people, whether it's their line manager or the president of the company or whoever it is, somebody that they aspire to be, but haven't got the confidence to go and speak to those people and pick their brains. What would your advice be when you sat down with Mike for the first few times? Was he open to having that conversation with you? Do you find that these sort of people are happy to help people that are putting themselves out there and showing that they want to be successful?
So first of all, in my experience, people that are successful because they helped other people be successful. And so I think a lot of people are afraid of approaching and contacting successful people, but there is, there's a saying, it's lonely at the top. It's not because they stepped on people to get there. It's because people avoid you for some reason. I guess my point is, reach out to those people. They're willing to help and share, but you got to add value. You don't sit there with a blank piece of paper and say, "Teach me." You need to add value. Don't be a suck up. Don't agree with everything they say. Give your opinion and disagree with them, not in a combative way, but in a way that adds value to them. What are they great at? Help them enhance that. What are they weak at? Help them compensate for that. And to this day, I have conversations with our president, Ron, and he'll ask me a question, and I'll say, "Boy, here's what I think," but I don't want to get in an argument with them. And so sometimes I'll say, "You know what? That's a really, really good question. Let me think about that and come back to you." And I make sure I really think about it, do some research, and come back and say, "Here's what I think." And whether or not he takes my advice or not, he always thanks me. And I help round out and chisel off the edges of his final decision. And hopefully I'm helping making his decisions and what he's trying to accomplish easier for him. And so I think if you do that, genuinely trying to help that person, I think that always, how can I add value to this person right now? I think they're going to want you around them as well.
Yeah, great piece of advice. Thank you for sharing that. So I think we got up to you with a field service engineer at Service Xpress. You'd gone from being employee number 5 at Great Lakes, you were in a similar situation with the new business Service Xpress. What happened from that point onwards?
Yeah, so Y2K was approaching. So it was 1999, and our accounting system was not Y2K compliant. And the owner, Mike, who at this point he bought the company from the previous owners in 1997. So he owned it full out. He approached me in 1999. The restaurant that he took me to, if it doesn't exist anymore, it's been torn down, but if it did, I could take you to the booth where I had this conversation. I remember it. He sat me down and he pulled a napkin out and a pen, and he started drawing out his plans for the future of the company. And he wanted to know what part of it I wanted to be. Where did I see myself in that future? And, I basically, if I recall, my answer was, whatever you need, Mike. I'm all in, give me the ugliest job, give me, and he said, you know what, we're not Y2K compliant. Can you help with that? I said, absolutely. So I left the field and I gave my territory to someone else. And I helped get our accounting system and our inventory into our new accounting system. We were building a new building, so I got that all wired. I put it in infrastructure for our servers. And I basically became our IT director of IT for the company. And so that got us kind of through Y2K. What happened during that time was, like I said before, I had my territory and I was a field engineer. And then I came out of the field, and at this point we had maybe 20 engineers. And I was looking around the company, and I realized that not all of our customers had the same experience that my customers had when I was a field engineer. It was very inconsistent levels of service. We had a service manager at the time that he kind of left me alone because he knew my clients were doing well. But when I left the field, I realized that the service team needed help. And so while I was still the IT director, the then service manager, I remember just also something to note here, Mike McCullough, who owned the company, he kept inviting me to these leadership meetings. And I remember thinking, I don't have anybody that reports to me. Why am I even here? But I would always give my opinion or help, or when the meeting was over, I'd approach that person that just really, really had a tough time in that meeting, and I'd say, hey, can I help you? Whether it was sales or service or operations, I think I can help you. And I always had the spirit of just, I want to help people that are not quite doing it. And we had a really rough meeting. They were just drilling the service manager, asking all kinds of questions. Why this? Why that? How come this isn't going? And he basically stopped talking, and he said, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to resign. I can't be the service manager anymore. And our owner, Mike, he said, hey, don't worry about it. We'll find a position for you. You don't have to resign. You're a great asset to the company. Just this job got over your head, so don't worry about it. I'll start recruiting another service manager. And then the meeting ended, and who is now our president, Ron, who's still here, and then 2 other gentlemen that had retired, Mark and Craig. Craig was our CFO, and Mark Thomas was our head of sales. The 4 of us were sitting there, and they looked at me and they said, you know what we need to do, don't you? And I'm like, yeah, but in my mind, I'm thinking we got to fix service. But in their mind, they're like, you got to take over service. And when they said it out loud, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that, but I will, because it has to be done. And so I walked over to Mike's office, who had just left the meeting, saying, I'll start recruiting for another service manager. I walked into his office and I said, hey, Mike, don't recruit for a service manager. I'm taking over. I'd really appreciate if you'd stay out of my way, because I have some things that I know need to be done. You're welcome to know everything and anything I'm doing and up to, but I just prefer you to stay out of my way. And he said, okay. And I walked out of his office, and that's how I took over service. And so this is kind of a cool story. I actually did a talk on this once. So when I took over as service manager, there was about 20 engineers. We were in 3 or so states, 5 or 6 offices. And I was a really good engineer. And what engineers typically need the most on the surface is they need technical help. And I knew all the answers. So it was really easy to answer the questions. So this is a huge leadership lesson that I learned in 1 week. So I would just start calling people and trying to help them. I didn't tell anybody I was a new service manager. And I didn't want anybody to tell anybody I was a new service manager. That's the lowest level of leadership is you got a title. And so I didn't want the title. I don't want to be I just wanted to start helping and turn it around. And so I started calling every single engineer every single day, and they would give me problems, and I would solve those problems. And I think I lost about 7 pounds in 1 week. I remember driving home on Friday, I just, the stress and it felt good though, right? Because I had a line of people outside my office asking me questions and I knew every single answer, and that feels good. And I had one engineer, well, that's a future story. So on Friday, I'm driving home and I'm thinking, oh, I cannot do this anymore. I'm going to die if I keep doing it this way. So on Monday morning, I came back in, and of course, right after 8 o'clock, I get my first question. Hey, Dwight, I have this problem. What should I do? Well, what do you think you should do? Who do you think you should call? Where's the resources that we have available that would help you solve that problem? And I started helping them solve their own problems. And man, everything changed. I saw people not depending on me and just using their own resources. When I saw someone that learned something, I would encourage them to share it. And that's, I think that epiphany I had, and it only took me a week, was huge. And there might be people listening that's like, duh, I know you're supposed to do that, but it was a huge epiphany for me. So fast forward, maybe a few months later, we hired this gentleman that he never even knew I was a field engineer. And by this time I had the title and I was the service manager. And he called me one day and he said, hey, I'm in front of a system, it's down hard, and the customer is yelling at me. And I'm like, well, did you call support? Yeah, I tried this, this, and that. Do you have this? Yes, I've done that. Have you tried this? Yes, I've done that. And I said, okay, I'm about to tell you how to fix it. And here's what you need to do. Go to the console, type this, type that, type this, delete that file, go here, and then reboot it. You should be fine. What happened was their system drive that has their operating system was completely full. And I had them delete the log files so they could reboot. Now, they're up and running. We got to get them a larger hard drive. And I finish telling him what to do, and it's just complete silence. And he goes, you're kidding me. You know how to fix these computers? And I said, yes. And if you tell a soul, I'll kill you. Because I don't want anybody to know that I know how to fix computers. I want them to know how to fix computers. And I love that story because it just illustrates the mentality I had toward creating a great service structured organization rather than just taking service calls and handling business.
Yeah, and I think when you say, it probably sounds obvious to the listeners now to put people's questions back on themselves to find out the answers for themselves. I think from my own experience, it's not as obvious as people would think. I think there's a lot of business owners, line managers, C-suite level managers that are carrying lots of monkeys from other people on their back because they feel that they've got to find out the questions and provide the solutions, when actually the right way to do it from your own experience is to put it back on them. And I think what happens when somebody comes to you with a problem and you answer it for them, then you're training them to continue to do the same thing, and you're not encouraging them to use their own thinking, and you're sort of stifling their own growth mindset. Whereas if you did what you did, then obviously it helps them to grow as a business. It frees up your time so you can focus on the important things. So was that switch in mindset just the result of being asked so many questions, or had you been on a coaching course, or had somebody pass some advice down to you, or was it just you thought you'd try something different and it worked?
Probably a combination of all those things. I think deep down I knew it, but you know what? When someone comes into your office, or when someone approaches you and asks you a difficult question, and you know the answer, it's an adrenaline rush. It's fun to answer it. People like to have information. That's why there's gossip. That's why, all these things happen. People love having information that other people don't. And it just felt good. So I think that's one reason why I kept doing it. And I'm a problem solver. If there's a problem, let's solve it. But I think the epiphany was I knew I could not sustain it. And, the amount of stress and the amount, I can't be the expert forever. So I think I just, like I say, that drive home on Friday, I had the epiphany that I just needed to do it completely differently.
Okay. And now your next position at Service Xpress, you'd progressed from IT manager. You went to VP of Service in 2012. Sorry, 2000,
Right.
just after Y2K. What was the story behind being promoted to that position?
Well, that was so basically, like I say, the story with me approaching Mike and taking over service. So I just became the service manager. And in about a year, we found someone to replace me in IT. So I was doing both jobs for a while. And, you know, I didn't ask for a raise. I didn't say, well, I can't do two jobs at once. I just did what needed to be done. And I just had that attitude. I remember we were running out of space and people were starting to, oh, you know, I thought I was going to get that office, and, you know, I want my team over here. And everybody was kind of fighting for the premium office space. And I remember in that meeting, I just kind of said, hey, I turned to Mike and I said, really all I need is a phone and a cardboard box in the back corner of the warehouse. And I'm going to, you know, lead the heck out of this. And it kind of stopped the conversation. Everybody all of a sudden realized, okay, you know, we need to stop bickering about who gets the best office and so on. I just always approach things from what needs to be done. Let's do it. Let's do it well. Let's do it efficiently. And you know what? Let's have a lot of fun doing it. Let's not do work for the sake of work. Let's have fun and let's accomplish things. It's fun to win. It's fun to accomplish things. And people follow that. So when I took over as service manager, there was really no direction. And, you know, I in my head, I pictured this train just sitting on the tracks completely still with, you know, the steam coming out, you know, there's coal and burning and there's steam being generated, but this train is not moving. So what I did was I just engaged it and I put the thing in gear and I kept shoveling coal, and you're going 1 mile an hour, then 2 miles an hour, then 4 miles an hour. And after a while, people that are hopping on and off that train are starting to think, man, if I don't get on this train, it's going to leave. And so I lost some people because they weren't willing to hop on and shovel coal. But what I found was when you get the thing going, when you get momentum and you start moving toward a direction, you find out very quickly who's going to help you, who's along for the ride, and who's going to hurt you. And, you know, the people that are going to hurt you and go in the other direction or pull the other direction, you get rid of them. You know, and how I did that was I would just sit them down and say, you're not having fun here, are you? This is not what you signed up for. And invariably they'd say, yeah, you're right. And, well, you know, what do you think we should do about it? They're like, you know, I really hate to say it, but I might leave the company. I'm like, well, that's probably the best choice for you personally. So how can I help you do that? I didn't like pull them in and say, you're fired, you know, you're an idiot, or you're, you know, they weren't wired for where I wanted to go. And I think those people appreciated that. And then the next level is the people that are they hop in the train and then they take a seat and they're just enjoying the view. You know, you have to identify those people and you know, what metrics are you using? Who's shoveling coal? Who's doing what it takes to gain more momentum and get this train going? And when you have a crew full of people all on board, going the same direction and helping pull their weight, you know, nothing's going to stop you.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I love the steam train analogy there and how you've put that together. Now, going back to those early days when you do feel like you've got so much pent up potential and everybody's working hard, but the train just doesn't seem to be moving. What were some of the things that you did early on to get that initial momentum? How did you pull the team together and find out who was the right person and wrong person?
Yeah. So what was going on? So here's another visual for you. I pictured every single engineer with a backpack, and they were full of stones. And when you have 20 stones in your backpack, you're not going to be very effective. They all had 20 or so open service calls, open issues that they couldn't figure out, or, you know, more stones came in. And so it was, I took care of 3 stones, but 3 more came in today. So it was just, they weren't getting anywhere, and they were just bogged down. They were down, they were depressed. They were just, you know, not engaged. And so what I did was, like I said earlier, I called every single engineer every single day. And my goal was to take 1, 2, or 3 stones out of their backpack, solve problems for them, and lighten their load. And how I knew I did that was at the end of the conversation, they would say thank you. So my goal literally was every day I was going to get 20 thank yous. That's what I was going to do. Now I would look up a certain engineer's call list, and I would oh, this one he just needs a PO. This one he needs a part number before he can close it. You know, and I would call them up and say, hey, how's it going? What can I do to help? And I noticed this call. What's going on there? Well, what if I called the customer for you and got that PO number? Would that help you? Oh, that'd be great. Thanks, Dwight. And well, what about this one? You know, maybe I can get a hold of purchasing and get that part number for you so you can get the right inventory recorded so you can close that call. Oh, that'd be great. Thanks, Dwight. And I would just lift their load. And I just started pulling rocks out of their backpack. And when you had 20 and now you have 10 or 5 or 3, you can take on the world. All of a sudden, even though you're still carrying 15 pounds, you're running. And what that did was that just created momentum. And people that were they would come in, they would drag in the morning. I started seeing them, you know, they weren't skipping into work, but they were excited to be there. They knew they were going to get some things done that day. And so on a high level, that's one of the major things that I did that I'm really glad I did.
And it sounds to me like at this point in your career, if not already there, you are becoming a great leader of people, a great leader of an organization, which we'll talk about more as we go on to you being the chief operation officer. But how did you know what to do as a leader? Were these some of the things that you learned from your early mentors? Were you picking them up yourself, or was it just, you know, from you being in the business and seeing what you think needed to be done? How did you know what to do?
Yeah, a few things. Number one, I was an engineer, so I knew what would engage engineers. I knew what drove engineers. I knew what made the job exciting and fun for an engineer. And bottom line, I distilled it down to they like to fix things and they like to please people. So I tried to get rid of everything else on their plate that didn't have anything to do with one of those two things. If they weren't fixing something, because it's when you fix something and people are high-fiving you on the way out of the office, that is the best feeling in the world. And when someone says, wow, I had a problem, you solved it, thank you so much, that's another great feeling that I know great engineers, they love those two feelings. So filling out a time card doesn't do anything to help you with those two areas. So I took the existing time card process and I made it as stupidly easy as I could. So it was like super easy and fast to fill out a time card. Just simple things like that. You get rid of the things that don't do anything to motivate them, and put them in those situations as much as possible. Maybe 80. If they can spend 80% of their day in the zone where they're just thrilled, you're going to have someone that's going to bust through walls for you. You mentioned too, mentors. Looking at other great leaders, whether or not I saw them on a stage or read about them in a book or worked with them, I would emulate things. And I would attend meetings and I would see the way people ran an agenda or kept track of action items. Ooh, I like that. That worked well. And I would borrow and steal those things. And we have a saying here at Service Express, our version of R&D is rip off and duplicate. We haven't invented anything new. We just take the best of who we see everybody's doing, and we borrow it and turn it into ours. And then the last thing is continual. I did a lot of professional development. I had a lot of cassettes. We had this huge library in our office, and I would encourage every business owner to have a huge lending library or a budget where people can buy their own materials. Today it's easy. You can stream. You can pull up YouTube and so on. But back then we would buy these cassette sets, and we had a whole library. And I would grab one, and I would just throw a cassette in as I'm driving around doing my service calls. Continually listening to tapes and CDs, reading books, and then finding other like-minded people and discussing those learning points with them. That was interesting how John said this and he said that. How could we apply that here? Well, I'm about to have this really tough conversation with so-and-so. I think I might try that. And that's the other thing is try things. Apply what you're learning. It's one thing to read a book, say, hey, that was a good book, or that was a really good reminder. You got to do it. You got to take action on what you're learning. And experiment. When I was a field engineer, I would, after a while, I know I'm going to fix the computer. So your goals start becoming, I want to please the customer, and I remember I had a few customers that are just always negative, just always complaining and so on. So my goal became, to win them over. And so I would experiment. and I would try certain things and just take note of what worked. What did they respond to? What did they not respond to? And you know, one of the lessons I learned early on in customer service is when you walk into someone's office, notice what's on their desk and be interested in something that's on their desk. It could be a picture from a cruise they took. It could be a beer stein. It could be, you know, whatever it is. Bring that up in an excited way. Say, "Oh, you like that beer?" And bam, they just talk about that beer and that stein, where they got the stein in Oktoberfest, and the great time they had. And all of a sudden, you're like in their circle. You're like, okay. And so just things like that, not in a way, again, to manipulate people, but because you want to build rapport with them. You want to have that relationship. You want to get past that outer shell. And so I took those lessons and I applied it to people as well. Everybody's different. Everybody has what drives them. Everybody has those things that motivate them and demotivate them. And ask. And you know, in the beginning too, I got in the cars with a lot of engineers, and I just sat in the passenger seat, and we called them ride-alongs. And the beauty of that is when I invite you to my office, you're coming to my office, you're already nervous, and we're talking, and when there is, you know, 7 seconds of silence, well, the meeting's over. You know, there's nothing else to say. Have a good day. But when you're in a car, you can literally both be staring straight ahead. You could have 5 minutes of silence. And then it's amazing what people will say after you ask an open-ended question after 7 minutes of silence. The opportunity you have in a car or in an environment outside of an office is way different than when they're sitting in your office across the desk from you. So I would enter their world and just ask them, what's the best part of the day? What's the worst part of the day? If I could do one thing that would make your job easier, what would that be? If I could do one thing that would excite you, and if I added a policy, got rid of a policy, you know, I would just ask open-ended questions like that. And again, I would get the real answer halfway through the ride-along, not in a 10 or 20-minute conversation in my office.
Now, particularly in those earlier days when you were first getting into the personal development and listening to the cassette tapes, who was your favorite from back then?
We were really, really big on John Maxwell. He had a lot of really tight. He's big in the States. I'm not sure if you've heard of him. He actually used to be a pastor. He wrote the book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
Okay. No, I've not heard of that one.
Oh, fantastic! It's for someone that's just getting into leadership. I would highly recommend that book. It's basically 21 laws, 21 real quick stories. You can like literally read one of the laws or chapters in just minutes, and it's just wow. Okay, I need to think about that and apply that. Just real basic stuff. John Maxwell has a saying: "Put the cookies in the lower shelf." So when you go to the grocery store, you notice that all the candy cereal and all the candy is on the lower shelves. That's because children are shorter, and they're the ones that, you know, mom, you know. And so we have a saying that we borrowed from John Maxwell: put the cookies in the lower shelf. If you want someone to do something or to realize something or to have access to something, put it in a shelf where they can easily grab it. And that's what he does. Michael Gerber, taking charge of your business and your life, is another. That's a very foundational. It's actually a recorded seminar he did, I believe, in Australia. We wore those tapes out, had to buy the CDs and over and over and over again. That's very, very foundational. What the cool thing about that is it's a seminar to business owners. And we played that for everybody in our company. And we really tried to pervade through our entire company that you are a business owner. You own sales for this region. You own service for these 20 or 30 customers. It's your business. And we tried to teach that through the company. So those are some real big ones.
Yeah, and absolutely. I'll put the notes to both of those resources in the show notes over at benjaminbrain.co.uk/Dwight Strayer. Now, you mentioned a great idea there, which was regards to building almost like a company library so that employees can come and take resources and invest in their own self-development without having to spend money. Do you make that sort of a mandatory part of your business, or is that just there for people if they want it? And how do you encourage people that aren't that way inclined to take an interest in their own self-development, or do you leave it to them to find it for themselves?
So I want to kind of back up, and Mike McCullough did something brilliant. He basically, I mentioned in the restaurant, we called them napkin talks. He would pull the napkin and a pen out and just talk to us. And what he was doing was he wanted to know what made Dwight tick, and he wanted to know what were my goals, what were my personal, professional, and financial goals. Tony Robbins has a part of his tape set. There's one set that's a goal setting session. He walks you through. And if you do it right, it takes like 2 hours. So it's not like, hey, if you got 10 minutes, write down your goals this morning. Literally a couple hours really investing. And we would do this once a year. And we would actually literally get together and start and stop the tape and write our goals down and record our goals. Today in 2020, we have right on our internet, every single employee in the company has an area where they can write down their personal, professional, and financial goals, with their notes, with timelines, and we have vision talks twice a year. Every manager sits down with every single employee in January and again in July. Hey, let's go over your goals. And they walk through their goals and what can I do to help? And it's interesting when you talk about professional goals, that seems the most obvious. I want to accomplish this, I want to do that, I want to learn that, I want this certification. When you get it to financial goals, that's the first couple of conversations is kind of scary. It's like, but how obvious? We're supposed to talk to our managers, our mentors about what I want to make and what financially, what do I want to pay off, or what do I want to buy, those types of things. Let's have those conversations. And it's scary because I think the manager a lot of time doesn't want to ask those questions because they might ask for more than you can afford. But what we never say no here. When we've had employees come to us and say, I want to make this much money. And we're like, okay, currently you're way down here. So in order to make that much money, here's what someone at Service Xpress needs to do and the value they need to bring. And you outline that for them. And quite often they'll either give it a go or they'll say, maybe I don't want to make that much. I don't want to do that much work, or that I don't want that much responsibility. But now we have clarity. And if they do have a reasonable goal financially and you have a path to get there, if they make it, pay them that because they're adding that value. And it has to be measurable things. It has to be, you are bringing this value, and so we do that. The other brilliant thing that Mike did was he had 4 core objectives. In the beginning of the business, we talked about teaching the business. He had this whiteboard, and he had it leaning against the wall, and he had in each 4 corners he had excellent customer service. He had employee engagement, margin retention, and revenue growth. So we want to grow the company. We want to maintain and grow our margins. We want to take great care of our employees. We want to take great care of our customers. And every time there was a decision to be made, he would turn his chair around and point to that whiteboard and say, well, how can we do what you want to do and hit every one of those goals? And so we use that filter to make decisions. So that kind of kept everybody on track, but also, goal setting became a very, very important part of our company. So when you get to personal goals, it could be I want to have a date night once a month with my wife, or I want to be able to do this for my family, or and so what can you do to help them do that as a manager or a leader? So one story is I had a gentleman whose son was a football star here in the States, American football. And Friday nights are the games, and he was a senior in high school, and he said one of his personal goals was, I do not want to miss any one of my son's games this year because he's like the football star, and I don't want to miss any games. And I literally put it on my calendar, and I went to the website of the high school, and I put every single game, home or away, on my calendar. And I remember one time I looked up, and I didn't know where the town was, so I looked it up, and it was like an 1.5 hour drive from where he lived to this game. So I called him up about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I said, hey, you're probably going to want to leave work pretty soon so you can get home and get the wife and get set so you can make that game tonight. And he was blown away. But to me, that was just the best and the right thing to do for a performer. And that's how I can help, as a manager, help you hit your personal goals. And, what that means to his family and his son and to him personally, and it's huge. So So yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, that's an amazing story, and thank you for sharing that with me. It's definitely answered the question. I've got a couple more to ask you off the back of that. So, from a co perspective, looking at the effort that you put into the father who wanted to see his son's American football games, somebody might say, well, that's a lot of effort and time that you're putting into one employee as a leader of the business, where you might have, in terms of growing the business, so many more tasks to be focused on. What do you get out of doing that? Is that worth the time and resources that you have to invest into individuals on that level? Do you get it back?
It's a multiplier. So who knows when? It could be the next week. It could be a year from now. A situation's going to come up, and that I know that person's going to take initiative, and he's going to treat his people that report to him or his teammates the same way. Number one, but number two, he's going to know what that means to him and his family, and he's going to know what the company's done for him, and he or she are going to again, I used the phrase before, they're going to bust through walls for you. And we have countless stories where we've gone above and beyond where we didn't have to for certain employees, and not only what that does for that employee, but and you don't do things so they tell stories, but things get out, and there's things we've done for other employees that motivates other employees. Because we've had people with terrible disasters at home, floods and fires. We've had people that have had major life-threatening illnesses. People are watching. Everybody's watching your leadership, how you act and react. And right now with COVID-19, everybody's watching. Our customers are watching. Our employees are watching, and we don't do things because they're watching. We take the right steps and we do the right thing because it's the right thing. And again, to answer your question, it's a multiplier effect. If you have the right people, which we talked about with the train, if you have the right processes, which we talked about, getting rid of the rocks and getting people in their strength zone as much as possible. If you have the right people, the right processes, and you treat them well, they all multiply each other. And so yeah, it's the cost is negligible.
And this type of leadership and these conversations that you have with the members of your team about their personal, their financial, and their professional goals, is that the standard for businesses in the USA? Or do people from other businesses join Service Xpress and they're surprised at this whole culture and engagement that you've built?
I think there's a lot of really good companies that do this in some sort of fashion. We've formalized it. I don't think there are, even though there are some companies that do it, to answer your question, it's not common. On our website, we have an ebook, and we outline this, what we do. And it's interesting because people are drawn to that. They read the ebook and they're like, whoa, I want to be a part of that. The other thing they say is, I don't believe it. I've heard it before. I've been sold before, and I took a job and it was completely, my manager never talked to me, and so on. And what's funny is when we hire people, there's a 3 to 6 month honeymoon period where they're just like on cloud nine. We treat them well, we onboard well, we have great systems and processes. We've had comments like, when I first started here, I thought everybody here was on Prozac, because everybody's so happy all the time. And after 6 months though, you realize that it's real. And people aren't perfect though. People make mistakes. I'm going to make a mistake. Your leader's going to be short with you. I'm going to get frustrated and say the wrong thing. But we're always policing it. We're always looking at it. We keep track of vision goals and talks. We keep track of people's metrics. We ensure and we try to pervade through, now we have 65 or so leaders and managers in the company. We bring them all in and we talk to them constantly. The ones that aren't doing it eventually get found out. And we either correct it or coach them or remove them. It's just not tolerated here. And what's interesting when you create a culture like this, my biggest fear back when we were much smaller, I was able to go to every single office, and I could see people eye to eye, and I could have these conversations. I could make sure these things were happening. And as the company got bigger and bigger, we realized I can't do that anymore. And now we have over 50 offices. That'd be a city a week, and I just can't physically do that. And something happened that I didn't expect. It started self-policing. And here's the cool thing: when you had say someone that had, let's say it's Indianapolis, and an engineer comes in and throws up all everybody, not literally, but just complains, oh, that customer's an idiot and we never have parts, and it starts complaining. What happens is his peers, his teammates, he or she's teammates circle around him and say, hey, we all have bad days, what's going on? How can we help you? And typically something's going on at home, or, family problems or illnesses, or there's always typically something else going on. And the team kind of rallies around, which is something I didn't really expect. And when someone is not behaving in a way that's conducive to what we're trying to accomplish here, the first thing their teammates do is they try to help them. And then it's almost like an antibody. They start repelling them, and they start bringing up, hey, this person, they bring up to the managers or leaders that, this person's not quite fitting in. And like I say, that's something I did not expect. It's become self-perpetuating, and people want to be a part of a winning team. People want to be a part of what they signed up for. If something is detracting from that, they want it fixed.
Okay, amazing. There's some absolutely brilliant leadership lessons there. So thank you for sharing those with us, Dwight. Now, you were promoted to Chief Operations Officer in 2012, and that's a position that you've maintained since. What were some of the biggest changes in responsibility and your daily duties that you had to take on as a result of that shift to the COO?
Yeah, so part of it is I'm wired to help, and so if you take the three main areas of our business, so sales and service, and we'll call it operations. So your finance and billing and so on. Not only do they have to work very well to keep up and to support the other two, they need to work well together, because the larger you get, the more complex things get. And when one team does something, there's downstream impacts, positive or negative, to the other departments and the company and so on. So I just kind of naturally started getting involved with other departments and helping them. The service side, we think pretty logically, and we create a lot of really cool systems and processes, and other departments didn't really have that expertise. And so I'd come alongside or help add people. And so I think that the switch to Chief Operations Officer is more about looking at the entire ecosystem, the entire company, and making sure that everybody, first of all, there's no silos. There's no one department that is doing something in spite of what another department is doing, or there's not duplicate efforts. And everything that we're developing and doing and trying to accomplish is complementary to each department. So I'm in charge of IT, and that has a lot of tentacles to go to every department, obviously, but I try to stay engaged with every department now. I have some amazing leaders. I have a chief customer officer who runs all service delivery and support. I have a CTO, runs all supply chain, and I have a CIO that reports to me. My three direct reports are all C-level, all extremely capable. I meet with them regularly, and I try to add value where I can, but in a lot of ways, they're doing it way better than I could or did in their departments. And so that allows me the time to kind of reach out to all the other departments to make sure everybody's working together.
And when you're looking to bring people on board, particularly for these C-level positions, do you have a tendency or preference to bring people through the business that are already familiar with your culture and how you work? Or do you have a mix, or do you prefer to bring in from outside and people tend to pick it up quite quickly? Do you have a preference, or is it just how it falls?
Yeah, it's interesting. For a long time, so different companies, we went, when we started, we were just, I think our revenues were less than 100,000 a year US. And, this year we're going to be approaching $150 million. And you go through these different inflection points. When we got to 100 employees, and when we, 250 employees and revenue sizes, there's different things that happen. So for a long time, we promoted from within because they got the business, they understood it. They were up in the engine room shoveling coal. They totally got it. And great culture fit. They had the right talent and the right skills. And as time goes on, though, we realize we do need to bring outside people in, especially in the C-level, even mid-management. If you think about it, I have a 2-year tech degree, and my first job is my only job. And today, this is the biggest company I've ever worked for. So I got to keep pace with that. And the person that can keep pace with that, and not only keep pace with that, but also lean out and say, when we hit 500 million, this is what we're going to experience or what we're going to need to do. We don't have that experience or expertise. And so having a good mix of building people internally and bringing people that have had those experiences and can bring best practices from larger companies to us. So we're basically, we're always leaning out and saying, we need to build the company as if it's out here. And another saying we have here is add a zero. So whatever system or process or whatever it is your plan is, add a zero. Does the plan still hold water? Will it still work?
Wow. I mean, I knew you were a big company, but I had no idea you were heading for a turnover of 150 million. And for you to have been part of the very first team that was there, to have seen it grow and been a large part of it growing to where it is now, must have been an absolutely fascinating journey. But you've mentioned there, you know, one of the next goals is to grow it to 500 million. When you've been in operation for 26 years and you've already achieved so much and grown a company of this size, how do you maintain that drive, particularly from the leadership down, and that resonates throughout the rest of the business, to keep dreaming big and to keep getting bigger and bigger? And do you feel yourself at certain points sort of feeling comfortable with what there is? How do you maintain that drive to get more?
Yeah, when we were say 20 or 30 million, we set the goal to get to 100 million by 2020. And when we set that goal, we were kind of almost like laughing, like, yeah, right. You know, here in 2015, we set the goal to get to 500 million by 2025. And that seems way more achievable than going from 20 million to 100 million. So what you need to understand is we're very much a growth-oriented company. We market that we're a growth company, organic growth. We hire bigger than where we are because we know where we're going. We want people that want to be a part of growth. We've had people that they get frustrated with our growth. And boy, I was hired for this. Now you want me to do that. That's not what I signed up for. Well, let's help find you a position where, you know, you don't have change. And a couple sayings we have around here is, you know, change is going to happen. So be ready for it. And, you know, all of our plans are written in pencil because things are constantly moving. And so you attract those people that want to be a part of growth. The other thing to recognize is, you know, we love excellence in everything we do. We're the highest rated customer satisfaction company in our industry. And we have amazing systems and processes and so on. I will tell you, though, we are a sales and marketing company. That's what we do. We provide amazing service, but we are a growth company. And we're all in on marketing and growing our company because that's what drives us. That's the fun part. Staying stagnant or slow growth or shrinking, you know, heaven forbid, would be like, you know, it'd be like all, you know, DEFCON 1, all hands on deck. You know, we got to fix this. We're just all wired to grow and go to the next level.
Now, if you could reflect on your career so far and pick maybe one or two experiences that you are most proud of, or would you say are your biggest successes so far, what would you say?
The people I've developed. There's people here that have accomplished more than they ever thought they would or have dreamed of. There's people here that are you know, what they've been able to accomplish here, and hopefully I've been a small part of it, is going to bless their families for years, and to see other people succeed and to achieve more than they ever dreamed or thought possible is pretty cool. And again, the downrange impact of that, you know, the ripple effect of someone that is blessed now that can bless other people. To me, that's the most important thing. So to answer your question, it's just investing in people, whether they still work at Service Xpress or not. I got to be honest. You know, our core value, what we're built for, is to help people achieve their personal, professional, financial goals. And I hope it's at Service Xpress. And we have countless stories of high-level leaders as well as mid-level operators and frontline people that are just are doing, and they love what they're doing, and they're accomplishing more than they ever thought. And I hope I'm a small part of that. But also there's people that are no longer at Service Xpress. We outgrew them, or something happened, and we've had people that I've fired that have called me a year later and had said, or emailed me or sent me a note that said, I've just now got what you've been trying to tell me for all those years. Thank you for investing in me. And because of you, because of my time at Service Xpress, I am now fill in the blank. And to me, that's huge. And those are my biggest successes.
Wow. Okay, great answer. Thank you for that, Dwight. Now, we've talked about success. Would you consider yourself to be successful? When you think of the teenage Dwight that had a love for computers and IT and technology, if he could see you where you are today and all you've accomplished, would he be proud, and would he consider you a success?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you're younger, you have your definition of success, and usually it comes out in material things and what it looks like and so on. And as you get older, your definition of success changes. And for quite some time, my definition of success is you're striving toward a worthwhile goal, and you're making progress toward that goal. To me, that's like the sweet spot. If you have that, then you're doing well and you're successful. And from the outside looking in, yeah, I could say I've been successful. But the funny thing about success is you never arrive. So it's almost like getting an award for humility. If you accept it, they take it away from you. And so to say, for me to say yes, I'm successful, is kind of hard for me to say, because I still have dreams and goals. And as the older I get, my dreams and goals aren't as visible. They're not as materialistic. But they're still dreams and goals. And to me, success changes over time.
So it's more about sort of the thrill of the chase and the journey. It's enjoying that process rather than what you get at the end of it.
That's what I believe. Yeah. No, having a goal to have, having a car or paying the house off, those are amazing milestones. And as far as goal setting goes, it is very ingrained in our culture. I think back, from a very young age, I set goals, short, medium, and long range goals. And I think where I got that from, I was a competitive swimmer, and very much into goal setting. We would write down the time we were going to get. Literally, we'd take a magic marker and we'd write it right on our bicep. I'm going to get this time into 50 freestyle. And you would constantly look at that while you're swimming. And you'd have it on your bicep as you're getting on the starting block at the beginning of the race, and everybody could see, this is my goal. And there's a lot of eyes on you. And even if you don't hit the goal, but you improved, it's still a win. And we would spend a lot of time on goal setting. So I've always been very goal driven, and extremely blessed to be a part of a very goal driven company.
Yeah, now obviously goals has played a huge part, and from me looking to you on, I would most certainly, from my perspective, say you're a big success. You're certainly an inspiration to me after having this conversation, and all of the things that I've learned personally so far. But if you could maybe pick 2 or 3 other attributes that you believe are fundamental to your own success that have helped you to be a part of building this huge company that's incredibly successful, or maybe from some of the other business leaders that you've met. You talked about Mark and your early mentors from previous years. If you could pick maybe 2 or 3 of the most obvious attributes, mindsets, or beliefs that you think are fundamental to being successful, regardless of what your definition of success is, what would you say they are?
Yeah, a couple of things. One is be aware. Just look around you. Pay attention. There are things to be done constantly. Whether it's there's a piece of paper lying on the floor. As you walk by, pick it up, throw it away. You see someone that looks down, have some empathy for them. Hey, what's going on? How can I help you? You see someone that's excited, go get excited with them and help them celebrate their success. That's the people side of it. When a big truck shows up and you're shorthanded, you know what? go out there and help unload the truck. Just do whatever it takes. Now, if you're unloading trucks 3 times a day, you need to make a change. You need to do better at hiring or that type of thing, right? But when you see something needs to be done, just do it and be aware of people, of things, and what could I do right now to make this experience better for everybody. And the other thing I would say is take action. So many people spend so much time, I believe, just planning and thinking about it, and we should do this, we should do that, and at a certain point, you just got to start doing it. And as we got bigger, we would have a problem, and the immediate solution was a big IT project. Well, we need to have this, built, and people need to do this, and people need to do that, and I'd get up, walk out, and go grab some pens and some Post-it notes and hand them out and say, tell you what, let's just keep tracking Post-it notes, what's going on first, and then we'll build a system. And within days, the solution is obvious because we've kept track of, how many times a customer called and said this, or how many times that happens. And keep things simple, but take action. Don't wait for a perfect plan to all be completely planned out. Take a step, evaluate, take another step, evaluate, and just keep moving forward. Don't ever stop. Those are a couple things that I would say that I would encourage someone that wanted to take leadership to start doing that. People follow that. People follow action. People follow clarity. People follow someone that's making things happen.
Okay, brilliant. Fantastic insights. Thank you for that, Dwight. Now, I'm just conscious of the time because we've been going for an hour and 10, and I know you've got things scheduled that you need to get off to, but, it's been a fantastic conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Before I let you go, Dwight, I've just got a couple more questions that I'd like to ask you before we wrap up. My first one being, you're surrounded by great quotes that you've got in the office. I can see one with regards to attitude on the back wall there. You've talked about the Zig Ziglar quote. What would you say is the best piece of advice, if you could single out one throughout your career that's been handed down to you so far?
Yeah, I think it would boil down to that Zig Ziglar quote that I talked about in the beginning. If you help enough other people succeed, you'll be successful. What can you do to help people that want to be helped?
Yeah, and you can really tell that has been an integral part of your own journey from the very start up to right where you are now. Even as the CEO of the business, that still plays a really deep part in your role as the CEO, whereas it might not so much with other business owners and CEOs and COOs. So brilliant, thank you for that. And my last question for you, Dwight, if people listening want to find out more about you or Service Xpress and the services that you offer, and find out a bit more about the company, whereabouts can we find you online?
Yeah, servicexpress.com here, and I believe I'm on the About Us page. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find.
Okay, fantastic. And again, all of those links will be over at the show notes at benjaminbrain.co.uk/Dwight-Strayer. Well, that wraps things up, Dwight. I just want to thank you so much for taking out some time to share your business truths with us. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've learned so much myself. Just want to congratulate you on all your success and the success of Service Xpress, and wish you and the team the best for the future and getting through this coronavirus storm that I know we're all weathering around the world at the moment. So thank you for jumping on the show with us.
Thanks. Yeah, pleasure. It's been fun.
And to all the listeners, hope you've enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you for your support. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you on next week's episode of The Truth About Business.